Hi, I'm Poplin from Imagineer Systems, and today we're going to be showing you how to do the Headless Horseman. Happy Halloween, guys. Alright guys, to get started, some of the things you're going to need. You're going to need some costuming, and if you're like me, you have this in your closet. You're probably not like me, I'm kind of a dork. The other thing you're going to need is a creepy fake head. Creepy fake heads I happen to have hanging around my house because I do mask making, but I didn't have a wig that matched my hair, so I spent about 20 bucks getting a wig at a local wig shop. I recommend going to a wig shop and not a Halloween store because you will get a $20 wig that looks actually nice as opposed to something that looks terrible. The other thing we have is a lovely green screen, which you will need. The other thing you will need are lights. I have a very simple lighting kit. And you need a camera, and you need a friend. In this case, the wonderful Sheldon Morley filmed and gripped this for me. Let's get started, guys. Hi, I'm Mary Poplin from Imagineer Systems, and today we're going to show you how to do the Headless Horseman. Happy Halloween, guys. Hi, I'm Mary Poplin from Imagineer Systems, and today we're going to be showing you how to do the Headless Horseman. Happy Halloween, guys.
Alright, so you may have noticed that I had two clips in the beginning. Well, how did I get those clips? Well, I filmed them both on a green screen, and then inside of Adobe Premiere Pro, I went ahead and aligned them and made sure that the sound lined up as well, just to make sure that my motions matched what I was doing with my hands. So my speech matched my hands, and we lined both shots up together. It's kind of a pain, but if you do this to begin with when you film your shot, you're going to end up getting much better results. Not to mention, when you use Mocha, you definitely want to make sure that you work in smaller clips. You don't want to have this huge edit and then load your shots in huge. From then, we're just going to load these up into Mocha. So I'm going to make a new file, choose my footage, make sure that my settings are exactly what they are going to be inside of After Effects, and I hit OK. From here, we're going to take a look at our shot, and we're going to start tracking. So I'm going to take my X-Spline tool, and I'm going to draw an outline around the front of my fake face here. Now, I'm drawing around the front of my fake face and tracking it because I'll get better planar information if I try to track the front plane rather than all of them. And I also want to make sure that I align my surface and grid tool so that I understand what my track is doing while we're tracking. You don't have to do this, but it definitely shows you that you're getting good tracking data, and I actually do recommend that you do it with this technique. Now, I'm going to finish tracking this. Suffice to say, Mocha tracks very fast, but we have sped the tracking up in this demo so that you don't have to sit through it. And now we're going to move on to rotoing other parts of the shot. So I'm going to take my X-Spline, I'm going to zoom in with the zoom tool, and I'm going to hide my face layer and track so that I don't have to look at it. And then I'm going to come in here with my X-Spline tool, and I'm going to draw a shape around my hand as my roto shape that I'm going to use to hold this out from the actual head that I'm comping into the shot. So, because if you remember what it looks like, obviously I'm holding my head at the end, and we need to get rid of this fake head. So we're going to track that, and then we're going to adjust the roto, because you can see the roto hasn't stuck on perfectly. That's okay. We take our transform tool, and we take our picker tool, and we select our points, and we adjust them throughout the shot, and Mocha will actually tween the difference moving along with our tracks so that we end up doing less work for our roto. So we have 3 keyframes for, you know, like 200 frames of roto. Well, almost 300 actually. So from here, we're going to zoom in, and I'm going to select my spline tool, and what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to add points to my spline, and I'm going to change my face roto. You can also link to track, but I just wanted to change this and adjust the shape over time so that I now have a place where I can put a new head and take this plaster head out of the shot. Moving on, I need to do something about my actual head in the shot because obviously we're replacing this with a patch. So I want to go ahead and roto my head right out of the shot so that when I pull my green screen, I can just pull my head right out of the shot. This is a pretty simple garbage mat. We just track and roto backwards, and then we adjust the roto to make sure that my collar is always going to be inside of the roto shape, and then we're going to add roto back over the collar to put the collar back into place. So as long as we have that overlap, we'll end up with something that looks very nice. So you got to be thoughtful about the way that you do your shapes. So I'm just going to zoom in, and from here we're going to take a new X-spline shape, and I'm going to draw around my collar corners like I just said I was going to do. So we're going to draw a very complex X-spline, and we're just going to track and roto at the same time here I'm just going to pull all of this collar into this shape, and then we're going to let Mocha track this. I'm going to call this right collar, and then we're just going to go ahead and hit track. Okay, as long as we're selected on our layer. Now, I just correct the roto shape on that. Pretty easy, just the same way I've been doing roto on the rest of this shot. Make sure that it looks good, make sure that it doesn't have my face in it anywhere, and make sure that it's moving naturally with the rest of the shot. The key to roto is looking natural. What you really want is you want the collar to move along exactly in the way that my collar moves in the shot. And that way, because we're using tracks, nobody will be able to tell that this is fake. You know, except for the fact that, of course, nobody is actually missing a head. So we do the same thing on the left collar, same exact thing. We draw our complex roto shape, and we track through the scene, and we see how that looks, and then we correct it. So I'm just going to come in here and adjust these points, just like this. Make sure everything lines up. And I like to scroll through the shot a lot to make sure that everything looks right. And from here, we're just going to see if that looks right. I think it does. Let's zoom out and just play it to see. Yeah, I feel like that looks very natural and very nice, and the reason it looks nice is because we're using our tracking data. Moving on, the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to actually track the front part of my chest and shoulders. Now this is where it gets interesting because this is actually where I'm going to start doing my insert. So you see I'm aligning the surface tool on my neck, okay, and I'm tracking this through the shot, okay, just to make sure it looks good. Now from here what we're actually going to do is I'm going to actually take a picture that I have taken of the inside of my shirt, and I've already feathered it out and everything so you don't have to sit through that, but I did this in Photoshop. I've made this transparent PNG and I'm just going to arrange it right over the area where my head needs to disappear. Now I really feel like the insert tool is an underutilized tool in Mocha, so I'm going to show you how to use this. We actually have a grid warp tool. If you hit show mesh, it'll be a blue grid, and you can actually change the levels of the mesh, and you can start to adjust this mesh warp inside of Mocha, where you can arrange your image the exact way that you want it, and then you can make sure that it aligns inside of Mocha. And it's animatable, so it moves along with the track, and then you can do an over-the-top mesh animation warp along with that, and you end up with something that looks very natural. If you hit render forward, you can render it with motion blur, like I just checked this motion blur box. We render that forward. What we actually end up with is an asset that we can use inside of After Effects, and I'll show you how we use that inside of After Effects. It's very easy. We literally just drag and drop it like you would any other rendered clip. So, moving right along, we're going to zoom in, and I'm actually going to open up After Effects at this point, and inside of After Effects, we're going to make sure that our shot is exactly the same inside of After Effects as is in Mocha. So we're checking our aspect ratio and our pixel size and our frame rate. Now if we don't have that lined up, we won't actually have good data. So we need to make sure that all of that information lines up. So I've set up my shot, interpreted my footage, and from here I'm actually going to just start keying my green screen out so that we can show you how this works. I'm going to use key light, select a color, and then I just adjust my various matte settings inside of key light. I'm going to put a very bright matte color behind me on a solid so that I can see what I need to pull out and see what my matte looks like. I use this as a trick all the time to see what my mattes look like. Now we're going to just go ahead and clip the black, clip the white a little bit, and see how we like that. I feel like that looks pretty good. So from here, I'm just going to soften the edges just a little bit because I don't want it to be too crisp. And then I'm going to go back into Mocha and I'm going to start taking my head out. So we're going to go to export Mocha shape data for After Effects, copy it right to the clipboard, go back over to After Effects. We're going to make sure we're on the first frame, and we go right down to paste Mocha mask. Okay, so we select our layer, make sure that we're on the first frame, make sure that we have all of the color information that we want to grab. I'm just showing you this one more time. We go to paste Mocha mask, okay? And now what we end up with is this nice shape that we need to invert, okay? So we just go to subtract inside of After Effects, and now we have a Headless Mary right here in the shot. Now from here, I'm going to take my collar, and I'm going to copy that. I'm going to duplicate my Headless Horsemary layer, and I'm going to paste Mocha mask on top of this, and now I end up with a nice collar in the way, okay? And I'm just going to soften this, make sure it looks just right, just to make it look natural, and we're going to keep on moving. So I just want to make sure this looks good. Obviously I've sped up this demo. From here we're going to just scroll through a couple of times, make sure that we feel comfortable with what those shapes are doing, and then we're going to import our neck piece that we rendered out. So I'm going to go to my results folder that Mocha has made for me. I'm going to scroll down to my neck insert that I rendered out. It's going to have its own alpha channel. I'm going to bring it in with a pre-multiplied matte inside of After Effects, and we're going to drag it right underneath. Well, actually, we're going to interpret our footage first, so we're going to make sure the frame rate is exactly where it needs to be. This is 2997. Okay, and then we're going to drop it right into our comp underneath our collar layer, and you can see that it actually moves really nicely along with the shot. But we have a problem. We need to actually color correct this. So I'm going to go to my color correction, and we're going to select hue and saturation. I'm going to change a little bit of the master hue and saturation, okay, and then we're going to actually adjust the color balance a little bit as well. We want to make sure that this looks really like it belongs in the shot. Okay, so we're going to go to Effect Color Correction again, and then I'm going to go to Color Balance. We're going to adjust our Shadow RGB, our Midtone RGB, and our Highlight RGB until we get an image that looks correct. And then because I feel like this needs to be a little bit darker, I'm going to use some levels as well, and now we end up with something that looks very nice and looks like it belongs in the shot just from a simple render and some simple color corrections. I'm going to add a little bit of a box blur on that just to soften it, and then we're going to do a match grain using Adobe's just basic match grain, and we're going to match it to our original footage. From there we end up with something that looks pretty passable. Alright, now from here what we're going to do is I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to find my hand roto, okay, and I'm going to make a new layer with my hand roto on it. So inside of After Effects, we're going to go to Paste Mocha Mask, and I'm going to have my hand layer over the top. Now what we need to do is we actually need to subtract my head layer from the layer beneath that. So we're going to go back to Mocha. We select our head roto and face track, okay, and I'm going to export that. We're just going to copy that right to clipboard, and we're going to go to Paste Mocha Mask, and we're going to make sure that that subtracts just like that. And now we actually have a really nice beginning point to start adding my face back into the shot from my second insert shot. So we want to soften that, make sure it looks right, make sure that we have all of the plaster out of there, and then we're just going to add a little bit of edge feather, okay? And from here, I'm going to move on to my insert. So we're going to make a new Mocha file. I'm going to choose my head insert, okay? And we're going to make sure again that the settings are exactly where they need to be, 2997 square pixels, 1920 by 1080, okay? And I'm going to come in here, I'm going to use my X-spline tool, and I'm going to draw a spline around the most solid, unmoving part of my face, which is going to be my forehead. I'm going to track translation, scale, rotation, and we're going to use this to stabilize this shot because I want to have a perfectly still head, because you can see I have some minor motion. I want to have a perfectly still head, so I'm going to jump to the Stabilized tab in Mocha Pro. We're going to stabilize all motion, and now that locks our shot down pretty well, okay, so that we don't get any pixel drift. And now we're just going to render that out with maximum smoothing, okay? And we're going to use this as our insert inside of After Effects, okay? All we do from here is we save and close the file, and I'm going to actually reload my stabilized shot back in because this is actually the insert that I'm going to use instead of my insert from my edit. So I'm going to bring this in at 2997. We're going to hit OK. And now I'm going to start rotoing my face so that I can export that back into After Effects on my stabilized layer. So I'm just going to draw a nice roto shape around the outside of my face. Because my face is super still, I'm not going to worry too much about tracking and rotoing at the same time. I usually tell people not to do that. You don't really have to worry about that for this type of shot. This is going to be a fairly easy roto. So we're going to adjust the roto exactly where we want it to be, and then we're going to have Mocha do all the work for us. So we're just going to track translation, scale, rotation, and shear. We're not tracking perspective because we're not moving in perspective, and we don't want Mocha to think that information is there. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm actually going to grab some points here and adjust everything, and then I'm going to roto my chin separately because my chin is moving differently than the rest of my head, and I don't want to have to like animate that, so I'm going to have Mocha animate that for me, just like this. And in this way, Mocha does a lot of the bulk roto work for you so that you don't have to. So we have these two shapes that define my head without having to do a whole lot of keyframes. I copy these both to my clipboard, and I'm going to head back over to After Effects. Instead of After Effects, I'm going to import my stabilized footage for my head, so that's going to be this stabilized footage down here in my results folder. We hit OK. I'm going to make sure that it's 2997 because again we use 2997 inside of Mocha, and I'm going to drop this in my shot, okay? And I'm going to go to Paste Mocha Mask, and I'm going to put my key light from my other shot on top of this so that I don't end up with a color mismatch because key light actually changes colors. From here we're just going to adjust our layer until we feel like it's where we want it. Now in this case I'm actually putting it above the face area because I actually decided that it didn't look right underneath. And what we're going to do from here is we're going to make this move along with our track. So I'm making a null that's going to be drive head, and then I'm going to go back into After Effects. We're going to open up our original footage where I tracked the hand area, okay? And from here we're going to come into our shot and we're actually going to make a new track. So I'm going to track the bottom part of my chin here with my hand. And we are going to track that through the shot by hitting translation, scale, and rotation. We don't really need shear information for this. Going to let that track all the way through to the end, and then we're going to copy this transform data. Okay, so we go to Export Tracking Data, After Effects Transform Data, and we paste it onto our null just like that, making sure we're on the first frame. And then we link our layer to our null. We end up with something that moves correctly in our shot, just like it's always been there based on that tracking motion. So this is how you do match moving in Mocha. Now I really do need to adjust this color, so I'm going to do a change to color. We're going to change my hair, we're going to adjust some brightness, and we're going to make my face look like it actually belongs in this shot, and my hair look like it belongs in this shot. That's very important to do. So we're going to do some levels in here, and we're going to make my face a little brighter so that it looks like it belongs in the shot, because it looks like the exposure was slightly different on the insert plate and on the original plate. Now, from here what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and zoom in and adjust our shot, and we're going to make a hair shape that we're going to use to blend my face back into the shot using my hair. So we're going to track this backwards. Again, we're letting Mocha do most of our roto work. If you are rotoing by hand, you're doing way more work than you need to do, so don't do that. Once we have tracked to the end of the shot, we're going to go ahead, take our hair roto, and I'm going to actually make some soft edges here, just like this, using the Inner Points tool. It's inside the Picker tool. Make this nice complex roto shape. And we're going to make sure that we have a lot of blend where it meets my forehead and less blend where it meets the side of my face, okay? Because I don't want too much feathering by the side because I don't want my hair to look transparent. I want it to look appropriately transparent, okay? And that's just going to depend on your judgment. So you don't have to do exactly like what I'm doing. So from here what we're going to do is we're going to copy this to the clipboard. We're going to go back over to After Effects. I'm going to make this new layer and we're going to just paste my hair right over the top here so that we have something that looks fairly natural over the top of my face, so it looks like the wig that I used and my head aren't actually that separate, okay? We have to do that to sell the shot. Having the wig on the prop head really sells this shot. Now we're going to go ahead and go to Layer, and we're going to make a solid, okay? And we're going to call this Hand Shadow. Now this is going to be a solid that we use to put underneath our hand to make sure that our hand looks like it's on our face. We're going to copy our hand roto, paste it right onto our solid, and then we're going to arrange this solid and use the mask on our solid to give us the illusion of having a shadow from my hand onto my face. Now, we're just going to use some feathering right here and some opacity, and we're going to use multiply to knock all of this down. We're probably going to end up having to take the transform down as well because that's way too black. So we're just going to take our rotation a little bit differently so that the hand looks like it's moving properly, and we're going to adjust our opacity and our and the rest of our settings in order to get the most realistic shadow that we can get. So multiply and minor opacity changes. Okay, so we end up with something that looks a little bit more dimensional. Alright, I feel like that adds a lot. From here what we're going to do is we're going to make a new solid, and what I'm going to do to this solid is I'm going to make a ramp. Now, I've used ramps before with Mocha data. They're really effective. So we're going to call this face shadow, and we're going to start knocking down the corner edge of my face to make it look like the dark part belongs where it is, because right now I've got too hard of a line on the side of my face. So we're going to go to Effect, Generate, Ramp, okay? And we've already masked off the face shadow, and we're going to just go ahead and make this ramp just like this. Adjust it to where we feel like it needs to be, and to where it's the size it needs to be. And we're going to add a box blur on that, because I usually feel like ramps generate too hard of a gradient, okay? And we're going to link this right to our null that we did for our face movement in the first place. We're going to create a second ramp for my chin to do the same exact thing. Alright, just like that. We're going to link that right to our face null as well. And we're going to make sure that our roto shapes all line up properly. Going back to Mocha, we're actually going to track the background because we're at the point where we need to start thinking about how we want to finish this shot. So I'm going to draw an X-spline on the right and left sides. We're going to track translation, scale, and rotation, and we're going to track this green screen. Now, I purposefully didn't leave too much smoothing on the green screen because I actually wanted some wrinkles because that gives Mocha more to track. We're going to make a new null object, and we're going to paste our green screen data right onto that null. So we end up with a null that moves right along with the shot. I went ahead and pre-composed my foreground into a foreground pre-composition so that I don't have to worry about my foreground anymore. I can just make a new background. So I'm going to load in this Wikipedia Commons background for like Pumpkin Farm. And I'm going to make sure that my vignette that I used in my previous comp is actually over the top of my new comp. And then from here we're going to go and we're going to take our foreground image and we're going to link that to our background track. But first we're going to scale it up and arrange it in the shot so that we don't end up with any bumpy edges when we move our background track along with it. So that's nice, moves along with the shot. It's still a little too bright though, and it doesn't quite fit, so we're going to have to go to Effect, and we're going to have to go to Color Correction. And in color correction, we're going to pick color balance, just like we did for the neck. And we're going to adjust the shadow, midtone, and highlight balance to give us more of a spooky color. We're going to take our levels and knock everything down. We're going to bring down the actual white point. And then we're actually going to change the saturation and master lightness over the entire shot. So we end up with something that's nice and dark and is fitting with a Headless Horseman sort of look where you're having your head in your hands. From here, if I want to make the color space feel a little more natural as well, I can also go to Layer, New Solid, and I can make a brown solid off of my sort of costume color and use that as an overall multiply over the top of the scene. One of the things you want to be careful of are tails not lining up, headers and tails. Mine are actually 1 or 2 frames off. That's not really a big deal. You just have to make sure that you line it up properly inside of After Effects. From here we can just add a match grain and we're literally going to be done with our shot in about 2 more seconds. So Effect, Noise and Grain, Match Grain, and we are done!
Hi, I'm Mary Poplin from Imagineer Systems, and today we're going to be showing you how to do the Headless Horseman. Happy Halloween, guys!